titles now published. Jack Canfield has made a big imprint with his work on success and success principles. He's also a seminar leader, corporate trainer, and entrepreneur. I'm truly honored and inspired to bring to you Jack Canfield and to welcome him to the show, to the Thriving Launch community.
Welcome to the show, Jack Canfield. It is so fantastic to be here with you. Are you ready to launch?
I am ready. Thank you for having me.
All right. One thing that we notice a lot, and I know that you've seen this a lot too, is people go to a lot of seminars, they read a lot of books, but then the change doesn't happen. And I know you're a master of success and a master at teaching success. And I'd love to hear why this is, why people aren't really making the change.
Well, I think there are a number of reasons, Kamala. One is that people don't have the complete system of what they need to do in order to be successful. I like to think of success as knowing the combination to a lock. And if you know the combination to the lock, you can open it. Doesn't matter if you went to college or not. Doesn't matter what your IQ is. Doesn't matter if you live in Paris, Texas or Paris, France. What does matter is if you're missing even one number in a combination lock, doesn't matter how hard you move all the other numbers around, the lock's not going to open. So if you're missing a number or you have the numbers in the wrong order, let's say you know a lot of right things to do, but you're doing them in the wrong way at the wrong time in the wrong sequence, it's still not going to open. So basically, I believe you need to know a system of success that involves the mental behavior, the spiritual behavior, the physical actions, and so forth. And if you understand all that, and you understand what we call universal law, and you apply that correctly, then literally you can achieve anything you want. I literally have had people take my seminars who were homeless, who were couch surfing, who had no money, and 3 years later they were millionaires with, they were running groups, they had their own TV shows. I worked with a 15-year-old who was flunking out of school, getting in trouble. His mother was basically hating him, was doing drugs all the time. And I taught him the system, and he then went ahead and got all A's, graduated, doing fine in college now. So it really doesn't matter. So, what we can do is we can dive into what some of those things are that make that system work, what you have to know. But basically, it's because people are missing an emotional element. They're missing the why. They're missing their life purpose. They don't have clear goals, no vision. They don't have a support group. They don't have a mastermind partner. They're not taking the proper actions. They're not responding to feedback. They're not persevering in the face of obstacles. We could go on and on, but basically that's the problem. And the biggest problem of all that stuff is people have limiting beliefs, rather, that are unconscious. So they're unconscious. They don't even know they have them. And that's stopping them from being able to do the things they need to do because they're being controlled by, imagine this, if you were getting on a plane and you saw a 6-year-old getting on the plane as the pilot, most people would get a little nervous. And yet most of us are running around as adults being guided by decisions we made at 6 years old to protect ourselves, to compensate for abuse, for being bullied, being teased, having failure experiences, having parents who were uncomfortable around money, around success, around rejection, etc. So that's a long answer, but we can delve into the specifics as we go through the call here.
That's fantastic stuff. I mean, the fact that you're really setting people up for success by having the accountability, by having the action plan, by having the support in place, it makes all the difference. I know that we've seen that with our clients, and that I know that you have really created systems to make that possible for people. Now, I'd love to hear some more success principles from you, things that you feel are absolutely necessary to have success in our lives.
Well, one of the biggest things that people don't do is take 100% responsibility for every aspect of their life. And I teach that basically everything you're currently experiencing is a result of how you responded to everything else that happened earlier in your life. And there's a little formula I teach which says E plus R equals O. And that stands for events plus your response to that event or those events equals the outcomes that you get. So an outcome might be you're overweight. An outcome might be you don't have enough money. An outcome might be you don't have friends and you're lonely. An outcome might be you're unemployed. An outcome might be you're wealthy, you're happy, you're healthy, etc. So what is it that allows one person to be successful and another person not when they grow up in the same conditions, the same recession occurs, they live in the same town, often they're identical twins, one's successful, one's not, is that the thoughts we think in relation to an event Like, people think thoughts like, oh, I'll never be successful. I'll never find somebody. I'm stupid. There's no men in this town for me, blah, 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 blah. And so we have our thoughts. We have our images that we hold in our head. Like I say, we're going to stand up and everyone's going to dance. Some people get all excited and see themselves having a good time. And some people imagine they're going to get up and look like a fool, and then they feel uncomfortable. So all feelings, by the way, are outcomes of thoughts you've had and the meaning you've made out of events. And then also the actions you take or don't take. So the only thing you have any control over are your thoughts, the images you create in your mind, and the actions you take, which includes the things you say and the things you do. And so what I did is I studied 75 of the most successful people in North America, generals in the Army, top salespeople, CEOs, Olympic and professional athletes, millionaires and billionaires, etc., and found that there was a set of principles that they all operated by, some consciously and some unconsciously, but there was a universal set of principles. And one of them was no complaining, no blaming, no excuse making, take 100% responsibility for your results. And then what happens when you do that is you start saying, okay, if I'm experiencing this thing I don't want, say pain, suffering, struggle, whatever, then how am I creating that? So one of the exercises I do with all my clients, both in my trainings and my coaching programs, is to say, what's a difficult or troubling situation in your life? And then how am I creating that? What yellow alerts did I get that this was going to become a problem that I ignored? My back was getting sore. I was starting to put on weight. People were telling me, this is not the way you keep a marriage alive. My wife saying, hey, you don't spend enough time with the kids. You come home late. You never listen, whatever. And so we're looking at what did I do or not do that's producing my current reality? And then what could I do differently? And when will I do that by? And also, like, what payoff do I get for keeping it like it is? A lot of people are suffering because there's a payoff. They get commiseration from their friends. They don't have to take risks. They avoid loss of face, loss of friendship, loss of money, etc. But usually it's just comfort. We're addicted to comfort. In fact, a friend of mine was just in the mountains of Ecuador working with a shaman. And the shaman said the problem with the people of the North, referring to the United States, is that we're all addicted to comfort. And you think about this. We love our big couch and our TV and our nice car and our good music, and we want to be warm and well taken care of. But the problem is growth occurs when you're uncomfortable. It occurs when you're jumping out of a plane, skydiving. It occurs when you ask your boss for a raise. It occurs when you ask that woman for a date. It occurs when you put your book out there for someone to judge. And so we all have to be taking risks, but you can't grow if you're not taking risks. But so we're addicted to that comfort zone that we find ourselves in. I have a poster I did once that said, everything you want that you currently don't have is outside your comfort zone. That's where all the good stuff is. And so I teach people, if you're not a little bit uncomfortable every day, it means you're not growing. I think Bob Dylan had that, of course, in one of his songs, if you're not busy growing, you're busy dying, because there is no static point. Life is a constant balancing, going back and forth. It's a vibration. And for something to vibrate, it has to go right and left or up and down or in and out. And so if it stops vibrating, it's dead. And so when we stop vibrating, when we stop being alive, when we stop being a little bit uncomfortable, if you will, then we're dead.
For some reason, that reminds me of a quote from Osho, and I don't remember it verbatim, but he said something along the lines where people that are more productive or people that are closer to God, something about being closer to God, somehow people are also more productive or creating more in the world. And he was trying to create this connection between being spiritually sound and the productivity that comes out of people. And to me, that was a really beautiful quote about productivity and how there's spiritual rules that if we follow them, it really helps us. I'm also thinking about something personal about you, and I don't know if a lot of people know this about you, but I've heard and I read somewhere, so I don't know this personally from asking you. I will find out now. I've heard that you really don't like to watch violent films. You don't like people to gossip around you. You really work hard to filter that out of your life. And when I read that, I started to wonder, okay, how does a father do that? How does a busy businessman do that? How does a man that lives in the world, very much in the world, do that?
Well, let me respond to two things. I'm going to respond to your Osho quote first, then I'll talk about the second question.
Beautiful.
First of all, I totally agree with Osho. I think that, the more you're aligned with spirit, and I teach people, you have to have clarity about your life purpose. And you get that by going inside and getting connected to we can call it the God self, the universal intelligence, God, source energy, infinite, wisdom, whatever. But we all have a connection to that universal spirit. And when we connect with that, several things are happening. We become enlivened. We vibrate at a higher level. If you've been around Osho and some of those teachers, there's this thing called darshan where you literally just change in your energetic vibration by being in their presence. Whether it's the Dalai Lama or Sai Baba or Jesus Christ or whoever, if you could get in there.
Or a tree or something that lights you up. I want to make sure that everybody knows that this is accessible to you at all times and it's around you everywhere.
Absolutely. It's in nature. In fact, you can't, one of my best friends was this uptight businessman for many years, and I finally got him to hug a tree. We took a picture of it. And now it goes on and does it regularly, because what happens, there's energy that's vibrating in this tree, and you can get that. When you go into nature, I answered a question for Inc. magazine where they asked a bunch of us, what do you do in the middle of the afternoon besides coffee to keep your energy up? And one of the things I do is I walk outside and I get into greenery. There's a vibration in nature that we can pick up. And if you can get your bare feet on the earth, you pick up the vibrational frequency of the earth as well, which is really important. But anyway, the idea is get in nature. If you look at a hospital, when you go into the recovery rooms are all painted green. And the reason is green has a vibration that's very healing. And so nature, obviously, where there's green trees and all that is important. One of my friends, we're getting way out on the skinny limbs here, but one of my friends was a breatharian. She literally went 2 years without eating any food. And if she didn't get into nature every day, she would start to weaken. And so she was getting a lot of her Shakti, her spiritual energy, her physical energy from the trees. And so you're absolutely correct about that. But basically, when we're connected to that God energy, not only through vibration, but also through meditation and prayer. For example, you talked about productivity. When I meditate every morning, I invariably get downloads of things I need to do that I've been ignoring, prioritization of things that are on my list that I need to do that now. The title for Chicken Soup for the Soul, which eventually we sold that company for literally tens and tens and tens and tens of millions of dollars. That title, which is now a brand worth, some people say $1 billion, came through a meditation. I literally closed my eyes and every day said, God, please give me a title for this book because I didn't have one. And on a Wednesday of that week, I saw a chalkboard. The hand came out and wrote chicken soup on it. And I said, what does that have to do with this book? And the hand, which I assumed was God's hand, said, when you were sick, your grandmother gave you chicken soup when you were sick as a kid. And I said, but this is not a book about sick people. And the voice said, people's spirits are sick. They're living in resignation, hopelessness, and fear. This was 1993, the first Gulf War. We were watching it televised on TV every day. And it was a recession that happened. So it was a huge amount of tension and pain, much like we had just a few years ago when Wall Street melted down. And so that title, if I was not meditating and tapped into that spiritual conduit, I would not have been able to get that. A friend of mine gave me a poster recently. It said, an iron works best when it's plugged into energy called electricity. And we work best when we're plugged into energy called source energy or God. So I totally agree with Osho. Secondly, to go back to your negativity, one of the things that creates contraction, and whenever you contract, think of a hose. If you want to cut off the water supply of a hose, you bend the hose, which contracts the hole that the water's moving through, and it slows down or stops the flow of water. When you go into fear, when you go into a negative reaction of any kind, your body contracts, your energy field contracts. You can actually see that with, advanced technology that can see biomagnetic fields and so forth. So basically, when you're in fear, the energy goes back to a part of your brain called the amygdala. And there, what happens is you're no longer in the prefrontal cortex, which is where creative thoughts, where rational thinking, executive functions, and spiritual insights occur. This is why the third eye is located in the front of the forehead. It's the symbol of the unicorn's horn, which makes it a mystical being, comes out of that. So basically, we don't want to be in fear. And to go to negativity on television and in the news, when you hear about ISIS, when you hear about all these things that are going on in the world, and you watch negative movies, war movies, horror movies, whatever, your body's contracting. It's also increasing adrenaline sometimes, and some people are adrenaline junkies. That's why they steal cars and jump out of planes and so forth. But the reality is that you work better when you're calm and relaxed. This is why martial artists, whether you're an Aikido master or a Kung Fu master, you study meditation, because you have to be mindful in the present moment, or you'll be distracted by your thoughts, and then you get whacked on the side of the head or hit in the stomach.
You know, this is really leading me into this other space. And very quickly, I remember reading in The Power of Intention with Dr. Wayne Dyer, where he talked about some studies where people watched violent films and the body was responding. And this was people that are accustomed to watching violent films or not. Your body was still responding in a fear kind of like state. So before I go into my next question, because I have one for you here, how do you cut some of that off? Like, what if your friends and family want to go see an action film? Or what if someone around you is gossiping and diving deep into this negative state? What do you do?
Well, I've seen a few action films. The key is something that Abraham said through Esther Hicks not too long ago, was that the thing about negative news and negative movies and action films and all that kind of stuff is your reaction to it. So it's your reaction to the action, I guess you could say. And so if you can watch the negative news and stay neutral, that's fine. Some people can do that. In fact, if you go back to the Wayne Dyer stuff you were talking about, one of the things they've watched with meditation research is that if I show you a film of a guy in a sawmill, and all of a sudden he cuts part of his hand and it bleeds extensively. If you're not a meditator, it takes you hours to get back to a normal state. If you're a meditator and you meditate, let's say for 20 to 30 minutes a day, then what happens is you'll have a quick reaction, but you'll go back to neutral really, really quickly. And so you don't stay in that perturbated state all day long, which a lot of people do. One person could get cut off in traffic in the morning on the way to work, and at noon they're still upset about it, whereas someone else could have it and, 10 minutes later, they've let it go. So one of the values of meditation is even if you do see negative things. So I do watch a little bit of news because I can't afford to walk into a room in New York and run a workshop and have 9/11 just happen that I don't know about it.
You have to be updated. So I get what you're saying, and I totally agree. I wanted to know if that rumor, how true it was, or what an extreme, I just wanted to gauge where it was at.
Let me just say that the truth is I limit that. I don't watch a lot of news. I get most of it actually from reading things like Huffington Post and CNN online, so I don't watch a lot of that. And the other thing is I limit the amount of movies I watch, period, and television. Like, my wife loves to watch The Bachelor and The Bachelorette. Quite frankly, I don't get into that. I don't see the point. But the reality is that I want to spend my time focusing on things that lift my spirit, give me more wisdom. I've read over 3,000 books in my life, and I claim that a lot of my success is because I learn something new every day and I apply it in my life. So, and the other thing is I don't engage in gossip. I don't engage in rumors, and I don't spend a lot of time listening to negative music. As much as I like country music, you have to be really careful because there's that old joke about what do you get when you play a country music song backwards?
The person gets their dog back, their wife back.
Their car back, their rifle back, their truck back, their farm back, all that stuff, exactly. So you want to surround yourself in a positive environment as much as possible because, we used to tell our kids, don't hang out with those kids that are a bad influence. Well, people and things don't stop being a bad influence when you're 21 years old. So the one thing we have control over is where we put our body. And, you can put your body in a monastery and you can meditate, or you can put your body out on the street in a gang-infested neighborhood. You're going to have two different reactions. So as much freedom as you have, we should exercise that to surround ourselves with positive influence.
It definitely reminds me of a very powerful quote that I love by Yogananda, Paramahansa Yogananda, who wrote a really great book. And he says in his teachings that environment is stronger than will. And for the student, really what that means is that our environment can really shape our will. And until we've really grounded ourselves in some of these deep principles that you're talking about and created a lot of strength, we really need to create that environment and that community and consistently come back to it so that we're reminded and reinforced what we're talking about. This is why at Thriving Launch we have guests like you come on, Jack. This is why we have all sorts of amazing people and experts come on here, because we need these daily reminders. So it's just a reminder for you, all you Thriving Launchers listening, that come back to the show on a regular basis. We're not just creating a show so that you're tuning in. We're bringing Jack because Jack has a way of working with people and shifting them, and all of our guests have that ability. And as the more that you tune in, the more that you'll find you're changed. Here's a question that I have for you, Jack, and it's one that it's like burning inside of me since we began to just have our pre-chat, is I used to be one of these guys that would go to all these different seminars. I had all these programs on my computer, and I was consistently stuck. It felt like more than anything, I was addicted to buying the programs and studying and knowing what the new latest terms was, So I was going into Eckhart Tolle and going to Abraham Hicks and Dr. Wayne Dyer and going off to all these people, but I wasn't making a shift. And I'm curious from you to learn, what is it necessary beyond just this educational piece for us to make that transformation? Why are people stuck, and how can they get unstuck?
Well, I think there's a lot of different reasons. Some people are stuck because their habits are so strong and they have no technology for how to overcome and replace those habits with good new habits. So let's just talk about that for a few minutes. A lot of times we've been told if you can do something for 30 days, it becomes a habit. There's new research out of London that says, no, it takes about 66 days for most things to become new habits, some things as much as 120 days. So what I teach my students is you want to create at least one new habit a quarter every year. Habits that are powerful, like drinking more water, exercising, meditating, being grateful. And we can go down the list, writing your goals down, visualizing them the night before so your subconscious can work on them. Visualizing your goals is achieved every morning with a strong emotional component to that. So your subconscious gets really behind it and so forth. So if we do that, every year we'd have 4 new habits. So think about that. In 10 years, you'd have 40 new productivity habits and health habits and relationship habits. Like my wife and I make sure we talk to each other at night and clear up anything that's not clear between us. We appreciate each other every day. Every Friday or Sunday, depending on if I'm traveling for the weekend or not, we will do the following exercise. I'll say to her, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate the quality of our relationship this week? Anything less than a 10 gets a follow-up question. What would it take to make it a 10? I've gotten as low as a 4 on that. When I remember when the NBA playoffs were happening, I actually like to watch the basketball playoffs. My wife said, well, if you want a 10, you got to put the grandkid to bed without me asking. You have to, not interrupt me when I'm telling a joke because you think you can tell the punchline better. She went on a whole litany of things. And a lot of people, they're afraid to ask that question of their clients, of their spouse, of their children, of their class, of their clients, whatever. And the reason is they're afraid of what they're going to hear. But you can't get better without feedback. And so that's a habit that I built into my life.
So I just want to ask very quickly, Kamala, would you say I'm at a 10 right now, or where do you think I'm at?
Well, this is public, so I mean,
Oh, that means I'm not a 10. All right, we will come back. And maybe on one of the next interviews, I'll tell you how I got to a 10. Continue, Jack.
There you go. No, it's true, though, because there's usually some little thing. But if you don't open up the space for it, it usually doesn't come out. And then you can't improve the quality of the relationship. And I always tell people, if I don't ask my wife that, I'm the only one that doesn't know because she's told her best friend, her sister, her mother, people online at Starbucks, whatever. They're the only ones who know and they can't fix it. So, but anyway, talking about habits. And the other thing that's really critical to change, so you don't end up with what I call shelf-esteem instead of self-esteem. You got all your notes on the shelf and you're not doing anything with them, is that you need to have an accountability partner. So many people are what we call solo entrepreneurs today. They're massage therapists, they're coaches, they're authors, they're speakers, etc. And so they don't have a boss that tells them what to do. If I tell my staff, call Hillary Clinton's office, they might be afraid they're never going to get through, but they're going to do it because I told them to. But I could sit there all day long and be afraid to pick up the phone because no one's holding me accountable. So one of the real secrets, and you referred to this earlier, is you have to have an accountability system built in. So that can be a coach, a mentor, an accountability partner where you get on the phone every morning. This is what I teach. Every morning, 5 or 6 days a week, I'm on the phone with you, let's say, and you tell me the 5 things you're going to do today to accomplish your breakthrough goal or whatever you just committed to in some workshop you just took. And I tell you the 5 things I'm going to do. And they need to be the things that are new, that are a little bit of a stretch, that are really critical, not just things on a to-do list, but really going to move you forward. Because most of us tend to do what's comfortable, not what's critical. And then tomorrow we get on the phone again and you tell me if you did those 5 things. I tell you if you did mine. No excuses. Just are you willing to recommit? If it goes 3 or 4 days, we start looking at, well, what's the fear? What's the block? Maybe I don't know what I need to know. Maybe I need to have someone hold my hand. Maybe I need an introduction, whatever it is. So I break through it. Now, if I do 5 things a day, every day toward my breakthrough goal, and we can define what a breakthrough goal is in a minute, that means every week I'm doing 25 action steps toward achieving that. If I had a tree out in my backyard and I went out with an axe every week and took 25 swipes at that tree, even the largest oak tree would eventually have to come down. And so that's a critical piece. And most of us tend to not do the things we're afraid of. And so then we have to look at what's the fear. And as I'm sure you know, all fear is self-created by imagining scary things that haven't happened yet happening in the future. And so I imagine I'll get rejected. I imagine I'll lose my job. I imagine my boss will get mad at me. I imagine my wife will say I'm a 2 on a scale of 1 to 10 on public podcasts, whatever. So the reality of that is that we have to learn how to handle our fear. And, basically I use tapping. I'm sure you know what tapping is, where we tap on these 9 acupuncture points while we say, this fear of rejection or this fear of humiliation or this fear of loss of money, whatever it might be. And we can literally disappear most fears in 5 minutes or less. If you don't have that technology, you can be run by fears and phobias your whole life.
And I just want to jump in real quick because I know that people are listening and they're going, okay, tapping, that sounds amazing. And I want to let you guys know that at thrivinglaunch.com, we will have a link to Jack's work, some of his classes that he's got, and also we'll have a link to some of the trainings by Nick Ortner, who's one of the leading experts and teachers on tapping. Continue, Jack. I wanted people to know that these resources are there and there's a lot of free, amazing resources. So tapping doesn't have to be this big mystery.
Tapping is really, really, really simple. The first time you do it, you need to look at the diagram so you know where to tap about. You do that about 5 or 6 times, and then it just becomes second nature, like what's your phone number? And I use it pretty much several times a week in my own life. I use it with my kids. I have them tap before they take tests, my grandchildren and so forth. So anyway, tapping is really, really critical. And Nick's a really good friend of mine, and he's one of the guys I recommend. I also wrote a book called Tapping into Ultimate Success, where we look at what are the tapping protocols for each of the success principles I've been talking about. So whatever comes up in terms of guilt or fear or shame or whatever it might be in relation to applying that principle. I worked with a woman named Pamela Bruner, who is a tapping expert, and we co-authored that book, but Nick was the guy who basically inspired me to write it. So basically it's fear, and then it's lack of accountability, and then it's what we call limiting beliefs. And you can also use tapping to get rid of limiting beliefs. My favorite exercise for limiting beliefs, because you have to surface what are they? And often you don't know. And so I will just do a little outline of an exercise. And people listening, you could maybe take some notes as you go along. And then later, after the podcast, you can go ahead and actually take yourself through it. But the idea is to close your eyes and then think of something in your life that you really want to manifest, but for some reason it's not manifesting. It could be money, a relationship, it could be a loss of weight, it could be stop smoking, it could be a better job, whatever it is, but something you feel frustrated about or feel stuck. And then with your eyes closed, noticing how you feel when you think about this stuckness or this lack of manifestation. And then you scan your body from head to toe, looking for any place that's extremely tight or uncomfortable or painful. And something will stand out. And then just focus on that sensation in your body. And then ask yourself, is there a feeling inside of that sensation? Like fear, upset, anger, shame, resignation, hopelessness, whatever it might be. And then go back to the earliest time in your life when you can remember feeling that same feeling and that same sensation. So what's the physical sensation and the emotion? Everybody that I've ever done this with, Luis, goes back to sometime between the ages of 3 and 8 years old, and they find an event where something was happening they didn't want. Maybe they were being ignored, bullied, teased, made fun of, sent to their room, physically hurt, abandoned, whatever it might be. And then look at what were you wanting you didn't get, and then what was the decision you made at that point in life? And most people made a decision like, this will never happen again. And to assure that, I will never speak out in public. I will never ask for anything. I won't share my feelings. I won't talk about people's, physical auras. I won't laugh. I won't be sexy. I won't dress up. Whatever it was that got them in trouble.
We make some decision to be safe, to play it safe.
Exactly.
And to never go back there again to avoid the pain. But then we become like that hose that you were talking about, because there's a natural flow for us to, maybe I am naturally inclined to be a jokester, or I am actually I love speaking, but I made that choice. So now I've created a kink, and the flow of who I am is now being shut off.
Very beautifully stated. Yes, absolutely. And once you do that, then you can see that. Then what I ask them to do is imagine a wise old person coming down. Could be Jesus, it could be Buddha, it could be your grandmother, it could be yourself as an old wise person, and to tell you a new decision and explain to you why you're not responsible for what happened to you. That basically you're a good kid, they didn't mean it, they would have done that to any child, it wasn't personal to you, etc. And then the new decision, and then go into the future and advise the current self sitting in the chair, what would you tell your 42-year-old self or your 50-year-old self in relation to this? When you finish that exercise, I've had people come out of that. I had one guy do that recently, and in 2 days after the seminar, he made 1/5 of his yearly income and went on to triple his income the following year, because he'd made a decision around money and his father that he forgot that he'd made when he was really young. And so,
Jack, and I want to,
No,
I'm sorry, I feel bad I keep cutting you off. I get inspired. And I know that you have this thing that you're going on and you're excited. I want to jump in and say that I've had that personal experience too, when at one point in my life I was feeling very wonderful. I was doing this practice where I would look in the mirror every day and I would just say, I love you, Luis. I appreciate you, and you are successful. And I would just go through and look. And now when I say this publicly out loud, I'm more confident about it. But I used to feel very embarrassed to share this with people. But it worked very powerfully for me to look myself in the mirror and give myself compliments. And I did this for several weeks, and my energy and my vibration, as we've been talking about, went up. It skyrocketed. I remember just for several months feeling completely in love with pretty much the whole world. Felt like it was just perfect. And I remember one point I was about to go into my exercise where I was going to compliment myself, and I felt this knot, this pain in my throat. And I thought for a moment, you know what, I want to release this. I don't know what this is, but I want to release it. And I'm just asking the emotion to come up, whatever it is. And these thoughts kind of started to surge, and I said, I just want the feeling, please. And the feeling came up, and this just knot just got stuck in my throat. I choked up, started crying, and I felt this feeling. And the voice said, you can't be happy because your family in Medellin, Colombia is poor, and you can't be rich and you can't be happy because they're suffering. And I thought, oh my God, this thing has been holding me back for so long because I feel guilty for other people's pain. And I made a decision at some point, even unconsciously, that I couldn't have more than they would, or that I had to feel guilty about having more. And to me, it really reiterates what you're talking about and the importance of doing this exercise you're sharing.
No, I love when you jump in, because you ground it in nice stories. One of the things that I teach people is to do a mirror exercise every night before they go to bed. In fact, I just got an email yesterday from a woman named Noreen Kelty in New York, who's a student of mine, who has done this mirror exercise every night for 1,768 days in a row. So
wow, amazing.
4 years. And I have to say, she's now one of the most happy, loving. She was one of those kind of real hard-ass New York kind of, bitchy women. And now she's one of the most loving, soft, fun, alive, dynamic people I've ever met. And one of the things about doing the mirror exercise, and I tell this to people, whenever you start shining light and love on yourself, if you're in a darkened room and you turn the light on, all of a sudden you can see the things that are there. But the things that block the light create a shadow. We all have shadows inside us, like your decision that you couldn't be comfortable and happy because people were suffering in Colombia. And so what happens is, when you start loving yourself and you start complimenting yourself, it's going to surface things that have been buried, because the love is going to start vibrating all that which is not aligned. It's like your tires, when they're not in alignment, the car starts to shake when you go over 60 miles an hour. And so it's a good thing because it's showing you there's something that needs to be aligned. And you, because you're conscious, you allowed yourself to be mindful and just pay attention to it and invite it to be there and then allow it to come up and out. And that's all we really have to do to heal, is to allow what's buried to surface. There are things like we're talking about that will accelerate that. And that's why being in a workshop with people or being in a coaching experience, you've got more energy in the room that's vibrating your system, if you will. So the stuff that's stuck starts to, you become more aware of it, and it can come up to be loosened up. That's why a group energy, a satsang of people meditating together, people going to ongoing groups, coming to my seminars, coaching with you, listening to this podcast, whatever. People, as a result of that, what happens is they grow faster. And that's why all through history, people have joined together in tribes and in churches and in spiritual groups, monasteries, etc., for that vibrational experience. The other thing I do with our mirror exercise is I tell people, start by saying your name, look yourself in the eyes, because the eyes are the window of the soul, and then say, I want to acknowledge you for the following things you did today. Appreciate yourself for actions you did, completions, any temptations overcome, like you didn't play video games till 3 a.m, you didn't play Words with Friends all day, you worked on your book, and any disciplines you kept, you meditated, you ran, you did whatever, you did the Atkins diet or the paleo diet or whatever, and then end with, I love you. And if you do that, I promise you, all kinds of stuff will start to move and surface, and you'll end up, like sometimes people within a week or two, their whole life starts to shift. As you said, for yourself, you started being in a much more loving, happy place.
Really powerful stuff. Before we close out today, is there any last thought that you want to leave the audience with? Well,
this will sound self-serving, but I would say that if you can, get a hold of my book, The Success Principles, not because I need to make another $1.22 in royalties. I could retire now, and so could the next 2 generations of my family on what I've already earned and saved. But what I know is this. If you read the book, you're going to see that there is a systematic approach to these principles. We've only talked about maybe 4 of them today, but there's 64 principles in that book, 25 of which are critical. And it really is like unlocking a lock. And I promise you, if you buy that book and you don't think it's amazing, send it to me and I'll send you a check for whatever you paid for it, because I know it will transform your life. And I wish literally we had a textbook in school like mine. It could be anyone else's, I don't really care, that taught us the principles of life, because we all learned chemistry and biology and mathematics and sociology and so forth, very little of which we use today. But if we learn how to relate to ourselves and each other and to the emotions, the mental capacity, our potential in school, we'd all be doing a whole lot better. So the Success Principles, you can go to Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, and get a copy. I really promise you that it will help you a lot with your life.
All right, there you have it, Thriving Launchers. We will have a link to Jack Canfield's books, especially that specific book, The Success Principles. And Jack, it is not self-serving at all for you to be proud and excited to share what your life mission is and the thing that is impacting millions around the world. So we're very happy to have you on the show. It's been a true honor to spend this time with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jack.
No, thank you, Louise. Thank you, Kamal. I really had a good time. Appreciate it.
You've been listening to the Thriving Launch podcast. For books and resources related to today's episode, make sure to head over to thrivinglaunch.com. We'll see you there.
If you've been looking for a way to change your